Now, to emphasize again the susceptibility of different types of microorganisms to biocides, here a very simple slide with the susceptibility or resistance of those microorganisms. At the top here are those microorganisms which are very difficult to kill. At the bottom are those that do not really present any concern when faced to a biocide. So envelope viruses on surfaces are very easily to get rid of. They are not difficult. Then you've got gram-positive bacteria. And at the top, you've got the prions. Then you've got bacterial spores, protozoal cysts. We don't talk about much, but there might be a problem in water. Then we've got mycobacteria, small non-envelope viruses, protozoal cysts. Then we've got gram-negative fungi and so on. So depending on the microorganism you face, then we'll have some intrinsic resistance against that biocides. So very now quickly about limitation of activities, and I will refer to a couple of studies. Now, first of all, on C. diff, as you know very quickly, that C. diff is found in wards. You've got some very nice studies that have been done in the past, looking at the location of Clostridium difficile, survival of Clostridium difficile on surface up to 5 months. And in some studies that looking at correlation between presence of C. difficile on incidence of or outbreak in patients, then you've got a correlation. When you find C. diff on surfaces in a ward, then it is linked to the number of cases you will have. Now, in one study done by Mark Wilcox on the very elegant studies, using 2 different types of intervention. One is hypochlorite that you would use, and then it's a neutral detergent, looking at the incidence in a double crossover trial. What he found very nicely, it's you've got looking at intervention with biocides is very difficult. What you find in one ward, then with hypochlorite, you had a decrease in cases following the intervention in hypochlorite, but the other ward, you had no difference between using a detergent on hypochlorite. In summary, it says, well, when we control or we use a surface disinfection, in this case hypochlorite or the detergent, you've got all the factors to consider as well, like cleaning efficiency, how the cleaners use this product, the type of patients, what antibiotics they're using, and I've added as well hand hygiene as well, which is very important. Now, in terms of intervention on formulation, the type of product you use as well will make will be very important. Here, different types of hypochlorite are being used in different types of studies. So you can see in this one, 500 ppm over that formulation. And you still got a very marginal decrease in surface contamination with C. diff. When you increase the concentration on different formulation, then you've got a much better decrease of surface contamination with C. diff. Another formulation, and you can see here the concentration, it's a high concentration, 5,000 ppm. Then again, you've got here a very evidence patient day reductions following a C. diff outbreak. So depending not only on the type of active you're going to use, but also the formulation is extremely important to consider. Now, talking about C. diff as well, there's a preconceived idea that C. diff is not, or especially the spores, are not very difficult to treat with biocide. That's a preconceived idea, which is absolutely wrong. In fact, C. diff is quite resilient to a number of biocides. On going through the literature with the peer-reviewed literature with different type of active, here I draw to your attention the time taken to reduce the concentration of C. diff on surfaces. And you can see it takes between 5 to 30 minutes. And usually with active that are at very high concentrations. Some active, like sodium dichloroisocyanurate, are not active at all against C. diff, even at concentration 1,000 ppm. And even on a different type of surface, it is not active. Now, what's facing, again, academic as well, when we do this type of test, the way we grow the microorganism might also affect the susceptibility of those microorganisms. So again, to show you how difficult sometimes it is to get the proper test done on the proper results. Now, a study we've done on MRSA contamination of surfaces, using hypochlorite and IETUs, and that was done in Cardiff. And in these tables, what I want to show you is this is the time taken of the intervention, 30 seconds and 60 seconds, and this is the log reduction obtained on the surfaces. So 5 log is very good, or 4 log is the aim. And you can see that when we reduce the time taken to clean the surface from 60 seconds to 30 seconds, well, we can see that we're very far off achieving our goals. And we're talking about hypochlorite, 1,000 ppm. I mean, textbook stuff for us should be killed very easily within that contact time. But what we found, 30 seconds, then you still got a high amount of microorganisms surviving. Also, depending on the clinical isolate we've used, this one is an MRSA, we can see that 60-second exposure to the hypochlorite, again, doesn't give us a 4 log reduction. We need to go to 2 minutes exposure. Again, I put it to you, when you use hypochlorite or when you disinfect your floor, what is the contact time you use with that product on the floor? Will it be 5 minutes, as recommended by the manufacturer, or will it be more like 30 seconds? Is your floor going to be wet for 5 minutes? I certainly doubt. So when we start looking at a failure of disinfectant, we find that. A study we've done in Cardiff on endoscope washer disinfector with chlorine dioxide enabled us to, on this one was glutaraldehyde, 2%. That was done in Birmingham. Again, we isolated, or the scientists isolated some Mycobacterium kelani, highly resistant to glutaraldehyde that was used at the time, but also cross-resistant to certain chlorine-releasing agents. The important things as well, the first time this year about glutaraldehyde is still used in some part of the world, like Brazil. And for the first time ever in the history of biocide usage, then we had an outbreak of Mycobacterium, an atypical Mycobacterium, highly resistant to 2% glutaraldehyde. So those isolate came from endoscope washer disinfector, but they were cross-resistant to frontline antibiotics to Mycobacteria, and they caused an outbreak in 38 hospitals in Brazil. So highly problematic. And this first time, that outbreak, cross-resistance to antibiotic, was linked to failure of disinfectant. Now, when we look at other type of disinfectant in endoscope washer disinfector, we find them here. In Cardiff, we've done that. Chlorine dioxide, 2.25%. That's way above the in-use concentration of chlorine dioxide for that type of application. And we'll be able to retrieve some microorganisms that were growing happily in that concentration of chlorine dioxide. Again, from textbook, we know that those microorganisms shouldn't be there. They should be killed within a few seconds. But here we find them, and they're happily growing or surviving those high concentrations. Now, documentation of failure of disinfectant is in the public domain, and here that's a very good review by Mark Weber and Bill Richela in the US that have been through the literature and looked at failure of disinfectant. And you can see you've got different active, glutaraldehyde, formaldehyde, QACs, phenolics, all those different studies that have been done. And in red are those microorganisms surviving in that disinfectant linked to an outbreak or pseudo-outbreak. So yes, failure of disinfectant is documented in the peer-reviewed literature. My feeling, it happens far more often than we think. Now, is there any alternative? Well, as you know now, wipes are being used extensively now in the healthcare industries. And again, we've been interested in wipes for a very long time. And we've done some study in Cardiff where the wipes are being used. And we found that in the ITUs, a single wipe is used repeatedly on different surfaces. And this is the time applied in seconds, from 4 seconds to 10 seconds on the surfaces. So this enabled us to design a test to look at the activity of wipes based on how good the wipes remove bioburden from surfaces, how good the wipes are transferring microorganisms on different surfaces, and how good the wipes are killing microorganisms within the wipes. And recently we've done a study on sporicidal wipes, which we hope will be submitted for publication later on this year. We've tested quite a high number of wipes. If you notice that most of the wipes contain QACs or detergents, and QACs are sporostatic. They do not kill spores. They're not sporicidal, sporostatic. And only the first one can claim of a sporicidal activity. And to cut a short story, long story short, what we have here is you've got data about how efficacious those wipes remove bioburden from surfaces, and you can see that only one wipes remove quite a high bioburden from the surfaces. Most importantly, what is the risk of those wipes transferring microorganisms from surfaces, and you can see all those wipes transfer microorganisms from surfaces except one.